Hello, bonjour, and welcome everyone. My name is Katie Gray, and I am the project manager here at the World Trade Centre Winnipeg. I would like to begin today by respectfully acknowledging that this webinar is coming to you from Treaty 1 territory, traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the national homeland of the Red River Métis. So thank you all for joining our Choosing a Business Structure webinar, which will be presented by Alexander Lavoie. Alexander brings a wealth of knowledge and understanding of international relations to his position of a trade advisor with the World Trade Centre Winnipeg. After graduating with a Bachelor of Business Administration, he spent 1 year living in Germany, 3 years living and working in South Korea, and has traveled to 23 other countries. He is proficient in English, French, and has a working knowledge of German. So as a part of the client services team, Alexander is passionate about finding opportunities for Manitoba businesses to grow and thrive. So we are in great hands today. Welcome, Alexander.
Thank you, Katie. So hello, bonjour, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Choosing a Business Structure. I'd like to first start out with saying that this is a bit of a compliment to a presentation we had held prior called Starting a Business in Manitoba. And we kind of walk you and talk you through the process of starting a business. It includes types of business organizations and legal considerations, name registration, taxation, licensing requirements, financing options, and more. So this webinar is a little bit more of a deep dive into the different types of business structures that you'll use to register your business. So before we get started, there are a few questions I would like you to ponder while we go through the presentation today. And those are, what kind of experience do you have with taxes? I know that's everybody's favorite subject. But do you have an accountant or willing to pay for one? Or you may be a tax specialist yourself. And if you're considering a small business, do you do your own personal taxes? So that's a good question to start out with. The other question is a size of your business. So do you plan on hiring employees in the future or growing your operations outside of Manitoba? Do you look for or require any grant or financing opportunities? Is this a bit of a side project where you're able to purchase all the equipment and do your operations there? Or will you have to source financing opportunities? Do you have any experience with legal or administrative documents? Do you have a lawyer or willing to hire one? How much time are you willing to put into the administrative tasks that are required for certain types of business structures? And the last one that not a lot of people think about is succession planning. So are there any considerations to sell your business or pass it on to next of kin or whatever have you? So these are some topics to consider going through this presentation. And if you have any questions, please let us know. The content we'll be covering today, we have sole proprietorship, partnership, incorporating, provincial incorporation, federal incorporation, other legal structures, legal considerations, and finally, some last thoughts in other considerations. So first and foremost, we're going to get started with the most popular. This is a sole proprietorship. So the advantages of a sole proprietorship are it's low cost, it's easy to set up, the administration is costly than that of any other type of business structure. And that's like legally speaking, documentation, time, and the cost of actually registering the business. Now, it's not necessary to register a business name. So when you're a sole proprietorship, you're technically self-employed. So that means any income that the business makes is technically your income. So you would do a personal tax return at the year end. Some of the benefits of sole proprietorship is direct control of decision making. So you're the one person in the business, you're the sole owner. You wear all the hats in the business, but you also get to make all the decisions. Another one is business losses can be written off against other income of the owner. So if you do have if you have a full-time job and you claim personal income and do your tax filing at the year end, if your business actually lost money over that year, then you're able to write that off against your income. If you operate your business under your own given name, first name and last name, again, you don't have to register your business name. And we go into more detail on that in the previously mentioned how to start a business in Manitoba. And one of the other advantages is use of personal assets as collateral. And you'll see that some of this overlaps with the disadvantages as well. But the use of personal assets as collateral means that if you do have to find financing opportunities, then you are able to use your personal assets, such as your home or car or some of your finances or cash assets as collateral for your financing. Okay, so some of the disadvantages. Again, there's some overlap here. So you're legally self-employed, which means that there is one tax filing. If your company does make income, technically you would have to file that as income for your tax year end. The owner is personally liable for all business debts. So if you do find financing and put your collateral, your home or your car as collateral for the debt, creditors may be able to recover against the owner's personal assets. So that's one big disadvantage. Business profits are combined with the owner's other income and taxed at personal rates, regardless of how much money the owner withdraws from the business during the year. So this is important to understand. And even though in the first part we had the advantage of writing off business losses against your personal income, the same thing goes the other way. So if your business does make substantial sales during the year, then you have to claim that as income on top of your maybe your permanent part-time or permanent full-time job. One of the questions I asked you to consider at the start was about estate planning. So one of the disadvantages of sole proprietorship is the lack of permanence. If the owner dies, business assets become part of his or her estate, and there may be immediate tax implications. In addition, valuable leases and contracts may not be transferable to the estate. So the business is actually tied to the person themselves. And if that business has long-term contracts for a product or service with another business or another consumer, then those will not be transferable. It would only be the core assets that would be included in the estate. So another one that you may be considering is a partnership. So this is a type of structure that requires 2 or more people. And it is actually quite a popular way to structure a business. So if you have a friend or a cousin or uncle or aunt or even your life partner, this may be a consideration of going into a partnership. So some of the partnership advantages are just like the sole proprietorship, setup costs are relatively low. Um, Partners, so the legal paperwork, the administrative paperwork, and the registration process with company's office um, are not all that expensive to set up. The partners can combine resources. So kind of like with a sole proprietorship, you're one person, you wear all the hats, you're the marketing department, you're the administrative department, you're the finance department. Sometimes partners get together because they have skills that, when combined, kind of complete the ensemble. So maybe somebody is really good at business development or sales or marketing or finance, and while the other person may be better with the operations side of things. So providing that service or providing that the skills necessary to create a product. And the other thing is that you can actually combine monetary resources. So if both of you want to put up a certain amount of capital or invest in a certain amount of equipment, that would be a good consideration as well. Another part of that is the split liability. So business losses can be written off against other income of the partners. And the last part here is split commitment. So when you're talking about a partnership, it's good to go through your list of strengths and weaknesses for each partner, and you're able to divide your time commitments for the business. So if one of the person's focus is on marketing, and it seems that the production side is taking a lot more time of one of the partners, then maybe the person that is good in marketing will actually take on additional tasks. And that's something that you come to an agreement with your partner. On to the disadvantages. Uh, so there are a few that we have to discuss. You are legally binded to one another. So in a partnership, uh, you're each responsible for the debt obligations as well as wrongful acts or omissions by another partner. And essentially, each partner is responsible for the actions of the other partner. Now, this is really important to understand because it doesn't matter if it's a lifelong friend or your life partner or your uncle, your aunt, your cousin, doesn't matter. This is very important that you have a good level of trust, but also the the legal documents to follow that up with. Um, Another thing with regards to the sole proprietorship is it's one person, one decision. But in a partnership, decisions must be made jointly. So you each have, depending on your stake in the business, uh, an opportunity to discuss or make decisions jointly. So that's really where a clash of personalities can come into place. So that's definitely a special consideration. Any profits or losses are split jointly. So each partner's share of the business profits or losses are combined with their other income and taxed at personal rates, regardless of how much money they withdraw from the partnership during the year. And in the absence of a partnership agreement, the business must be dissolved when a partner leaves or dies, or when there is a dispute which cannot be resolved. Also, the death or retirement of a partner will not end the partner's liability for debts and obligations of the partnerships that were incurred before the death or retirement. So I will bring this up later, but if anything happens with that partnership or the business, please contact the organization that you registered your business with, namely for Manitoba, it would be Companies Office, and dissolve that partnership. So a few special considerations with partnership. I mentioned this before. Get a partnership agreement. So this requires separate legal representation. A partnership agreement, or also called a general partnership or partnership contract, is a document used to dictate the terms of a business partnership between two or more partners. It includes information about capital contributions, management functions, and profit and loss distribution, among other things. So remuneration, tasks, duties, commitment, and I'll mention the shotgun clause, which comes up very frequently in partnership agreements. So under the shotgun clause, one partner, if you have a disagreement or whatever happens with the business, one partner can offer to buy out the other partner. Now, this is a bit of a double-edged sword, because once partner one offers to buy out partner two for a set price, partner two can either accept the offer, or they can turn around and pay partner one the amount that they were going to offer to buy them out of the business. And the purpose for the shotgun clause is to induce the parties to wanting to to terminate the relationship, but also to offer a fair price for either partner involved. And even though you offer to buy out one partner, you always run the risk of the reversal, where the partner can buy you out for that set price. So regardless, I'm going to mention this again, regardless if it's a family member or someone you've known a long time, definitely seek separate legal representation, fill out this partnership agreement or partnership contract, and it saves a lot of headaches down the line. Now we'll get into a little bit more of a complicated business structure, and that is incorporating. So a corporation is a legal entity that is separate and distinct from its owners. So unlike sole proprietorship and partnership, it is a separate entity. And the corporation name must include a legal element identified by the terms limited, LTD, incorporated, Inc., corporation, or corp. So if I were to set up a business, Business Consultation Inc. would be my incorporating name. And I'm going to mention this a couple times, but legal assistance is always advisable when setting up a corporation. Some of the advantages. With a corporation, there's limited liability and exposure for personal assets. Now, this is not always the case because the majority of financial institutions, especially in the startup phase of a business, will require assets or collateral when handing out financing. So there is limited liability once you've started growing the assets and capital within your business, but it's not always the case. It is easier to obtain financing. You may be able to access larger loans and the ability to raise equity capital from investors. So there's also tax deferrals, profitable small businesses with active business income, meaning that you've had sales with your product or your service, can take advantage of a tax deferral due to low corporate tax returns. So you could defer losses until the next year, perhaps, to be able to, I don't know, to be able to offset some of the income taxes that you'd be paying in a profitable year. So there's also income splitting opportunities with members of your family or other individuals that become shareholders and receive dividends from the corporation. So there's a few different ways of income splitting with a corporation, and that usually determines on the amount of shares or percentage of the shares that you own in the business. Unlike a sole proprietorship, a corporation or stake is transferable in estate planning. So if the shareholder dies or would like to relinquish their shares, that can be put into the estate planning portion of it. So you can pass it on to your next of kin a little bit more easier than, let's say, a sole proprietorship. There are also capital gains exemption on the sale of shares of a qualifying small business corporation. So that is something that you would look into with your accountant or your lawyer and identify how much the exemption would be. Disadvantages. So even though I listed a bunch of advantages, it requires a lot of administrative cost and time. So it has a higher setup cost and administrative costs. There's more administrative requirements, including holding an annual shareholders meeting for some corporations, keeping minute books and share records up to date, filing an annual return of information, and preparing and filing a separate annual corporate tax return. So it's quite a bit more complicated and different than filing a personal income tax return. It is the most complex business structure to set up compared to a sole proprietorship and partnership. And care must be taken in setting up classes of shares, determining who will be shareholders and how much control they will have. So again, I'm going to put that out there is legal advice is highly recommended when you're setting up a corporation. Now, speaking of corporation, there is two distinct ways you can set it up. There is a provincial corporation and there's a federal incorporation. So with provincial corporation, you're legally able to register a corporation in individual provinces and territories in Canada. So for Manitoba, you would contact Companies Office, but there is a Companies Office equivalent in every province and territory in Canada. The benefit of incorporating provincially is for businesses with operations and customers only in Manitoba. So you then receive name security for Manitoba. So if you were to register the name XYZ Inc., nobody else in Manitoba would be able to register XYZ Inc. As long as your name is still under use and still registered and in good standing. There is less paperwork, so this is an advantage over the federal incorporation. There's less paperwork if you're only going to incorporate in the province. There are some disadvantages when you're considering growth. So I'll provide you an example. If you incorporate your business in Manitoba, and then you want to do business in Ontario, let's say you make a connection or you've done some business development or you're sourcing a contract in Ontario. You can register. So first and foremost, you have to register in the province or territory that you're going to be conducting business. So even though you do have your corporation in the province of Manitoba, you also have to register it in Ontario to follow those kinds of sale leads and expansion plans. So you can do that. You can go to the Ontario equivalent of Companies Office and register, file for incorporation for the province of Ontario. However, there's no guarantee that there won't be a business of that name or similar name operating there. So if you have the name protection rights of XYZ Inc. in Manitoba, it doesn't mean that Ontario won't have a similar business in Ontario called XYZ Inc. or XYZ Incorporated or XYZ Corporation. So that's where the name protection comes into being a disadvantage to only registering provincially. Now, the next one is federal incorporation. And a federal incorporation, it provides you Canada-wide name protection. So in the example of XYZ Inc., if you were to incorporate federally, you would have the name protection through all the province and territories in Canada. Now, when you do that, when you incorporate federally, you do still have to do a separate registration in each province and territory that you will be conducting business in. So if you were to register XYZ Inc. At the federal level, you would still have to register with Companies Office in Manitoba, and you would still have to register with the Companies Office equivalent in Ontario. Now, a federal incorporation will involve more paperwork every year, as you will need to comply with the corporate filings required by the Federal Director of Corporations branch. It sounds like a mouthful. It's not as complicated as that, but it's something to consider. And you do have to keep up to date with the filings. Along with that, not only do you have to do the filings at the federal level, but you also have to keep up to date with the filings in each individual province and territory that you're registered at. Now, there's a few other structures that I wanted to comment on. There are cooperatives and there's nonprofits. Now, one of the important things is that both of these are corporations, technically, with a bit of a twist. So a cooperative is legally a corporation. So again, federal or provincial. It is membership based. So it's an autonomous associate. This is the exact definition. It's an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. In layman's terms, it's owned by members. So if you think of a co-op, you have a membership. You're able to vote democratically on the board of directors. So if you have a membership stake, you're able to vote on certain pieces of the bylaws or how the co-op is governed. There are a few different kinds of cooperatives. So a consumer co-op provides products or services to its members. So this, such as retail co-op, housing, financial, healthcare, childcare. So for example, you would do the co-op that we all know, where they provide grocery store and gas, right? So service and products. A producer co-op processes and markets the goods or services produced by its members and or supplies products or services necessary to the members. Professional activities, such as independent entrepreneurs, artisans, or farmers. There's also a worker co-op, so it provides employment for its members. And in this type of co-op, the employees are the members and the owners of the enterprise. And then finally, there's a multi-stakeholder co-op. And it serves the needs of different stakeholder groups, such as employees, clients, and other interested individuals and organizations. And this type of co-op is usually found in health, home care, and other social enterprises. Now, for the nonprofit, there are a few different distinctions. So this is legally a corporation. Um, and it's important to note that you do have a lot more reporting requirements if you want to identify as a nonprofit status. And it's even more difficult if you want to identify as a charitable status corporation. So some of the reporting requirements on top of all the legal requirements that you have to do for a corporation is file an annual return every year. And it provides up-to-date information about your not-for-profit corporation. This information is then made available to public through Corporations Canada website. And members of the public, financial institutions, and many other interested parties rely on this information, and you're required to file it every year. You do have to keep in mind that you have to report changes regarding directors, and you have to file financial statements and public accountants reports. Now, there are a few, I know I mentioned legal requirements, but please, please, please report changes of registered office address. Your registered office address is the official address for communication with your business. So it doesn't matter if you're sole proprietor, partnership, um, corporation, federally or provincially. If your office address changes, you have to notify the appropriate organization. So you report any changes in board of directors or owners. So this goes with the federal or provincial corporation, either with the co-op or nonprofit or charitable status. So bylaws set out valuable information about your nonprofit or corporation. Yeah, so for the copies of bylaws, Corporations Canada does not review your bylaws, but does make them available to the public. So in most cases, a bylaw is created, changed, or repealed by the directors of the corporation, and then submitted to the members for confirmation. So that's where the democratic piece comes in with the co-op as well. So you're required to send copies of all new bylaws, changes to bylaws, and repeal of bylaws. And last point is get legal representation. These are just some final notes and thoughts and considerations for you to take with a grain of salt, as you will. Sole proprietorships are the easiest and the most cost-efficient means of starting a business, and it's the most popular form of business in Manitoba. If you do register a sole proprietorship or a partnership, it can be converted to a corporation if the needs of the businesses change. So the decision to incorporate is often prompted by the need for limited liability protection, lower corporate tax returns, tax deferral, the opportunity for income splitting, or even estate planning. Okay. So a provincial corporation, again, just like a sole proprietor and partnership can turn into a corporation or partnership at the future date, a provincial corporation can be registered as a federal corporation going forward. Now, just one small thing is that there may be someone with a similar corporate name in another province or territory when you go to register it at the federal level. And last but not least, consult with a professional, especially if you're looking at incorporating. You absolutely need legal representation, and you certainly need an accountant on your side. And last but not least, dissolve the business when you're done. So if it's your partnership or sole proprietorship or your corporation, if something goes wrong, if you've given up on it, dissolve dissolve the business legally, so that it can't come back at a future date, and you would still be liable for what the business has done. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Alexander. So I will just take a moment to mention that on October 25th, we do have another webinar coming to you from the World Trade Centre Winnipeg as well, called An Introduction to Market Research. And so this webinar will go through all the details you need to know, whether you're considering writing a business plan or launching your business, and how to set yourself up for success through thorough market research. So I did just drop the link into the chat. If you're interested, please register there. So thank you very much, Alexander, for your wonderful presentation, and for all our participants for their questions. I hope you have a great rest of your day.